What's up? We're doing epoxy today, removing an old failing coating and installing a shiny new one. Simple as that. Now, unfortunately for me, I installed epoxy floor systems professionally off and on for 10 plus years. 10 years of my life I'm never getting back. And yet here I am, just can't seem to stay away. On the bright side, I finally get to do a brain dump of all this narrowly relevant knowledge that's been stuck in my head all these years. On a platform where it seems like most people really just have no idea what they're doing. But not you. At least if you watch the rest of this video. We'll be doing my basement today, but I'll cover tips and techniques that can apply to any indoor concrete floor you want, like your garage or your shed. The existing epoxy is failing in a few places and looks to leave something to be desired. We'll eradicate all this before we put our own coating down. Remember, you must always remove these old coatings before applying a new one, even if it's the same color. The old coating will continue to fail and peel up underneath, drastically shortening your new coating's lifespan. This goes for tile, glue, house paint, shag carpet, anything. It all needs to go. I find cheap epoxy is usually the worst of all worlds. It's failing enough to look like shit, but it's still stuck on enough to be a pain in the ass to remove. But don't fret. As we say in the biz, the floor needs what it's gonna get. The weapon of choice will be your 7-inch angle grinder with a full complement of dust collection. I suggest benching the old home shop vac for this one. It sucks, and not in the way you want it to. I mean, it could work, but this grinder is gonna overwhelm the filters with dust, so you'd be better off renting an industrial grade vacuum that sucks even more. In the way you want it to. But either way, just assume dust is gonna get out of hand no matter what. I always seem to forget this, so cover up your furnace and any other precious surfaces in case this all ends like Pompeii. Now, as far as Destructo discs go, here's your pipeline. Start with a 30 grit diamond wheel, a woman's best friend. Whether or not you're removing an old coating, you need to diamond wheel your entire floor anyways to erase contaminants and create a proper mechanical profile. We'll get into all that more later. In rare cases, diamonds are enough to remove weaker old coatings, but most of the time that stuff is just on there, so you need to call in the heavy artillery. Pitch circle diameter, or PCD wheels, are an aggressive option that should be used explicitly for removing old coatings like glue, epoxy, floor leveler, etc. It's a downright violent attachment that will wreak havoc on whatever is in its path, including your concrete floor. You'll have to take extra care to smooth out any scars it leaves behind with your diamond wheel, lest you live with them for the rest of your days. Oh look, another penny. A viewer recently informed me that leaving pennies in your work is actually an ancient tradition practiced by craftsmen as a token of good fortune and prosperity. And it's honestly changed the way I think about them when I find these all around my house. So if you're among the dying breed of tradesmen still leaving silly little luck charms in your customers' homes like this, stop it. If money is no object, you can buy a Dyma-brush head. These won't be so hard on your floor, but they will cost you an arm and a leg. You can also rent them for all sorts of equipment, from hand grinders to floor buffers. They do make walk-behind planetary grinders small enough to carry into a basement. They're alright on bare concrete, but in my experience, for removals, 110 volt walk-behinds just don't have the balls to remove old epoxy practically, and it's always been quicker for me to do it with a hand grinder. The 20 amp units aren't so bad, but I didn't bother. Removing the epoxy with the PCD is the easy part. It took me about 2 hours over 517 square feet. The real fun is erasing all the other bull honky with the diamond wheel. This is probably why you don't see too many post-removal floors with a clear coat over concrete like this. The price is your time, your back, sanity, etc. The rest took an additional 8 hours. But you have to ask, what's a few days worth of suffering for a great looking floor that should ultimately last anywhere between 20 and 1,000 years? Since this is a basement, it's pretty much going to be limited to foot traffic only. In a garage or industrial setting, however, you'd need to contend with vehicles. Tires and other heavy things put a lot more strain on the coating. So in the biz, we take an extra step in preparation to ensure bond strength is at a maximum. Shot blasting. Cut it out with the sound effects. This device is essentially, and I kid you not, a fully automatic shotgun that is continuously shooting steel shot at the floor. I mean, just spanking it. It creates a greater depth of penetration for the epoxy, allowing the strongest possible mechanical bond. Overkill for down here. And sometimes it leaves blast lines on the floor that aren't a problem for pigmented coatings, but for clear, I didn't want to take any chances. Listen, when I did this professionally, we didn't touch acid etching. Your DIY kit tells you it's okay, because frankly, you're more likely to buy an all-in-one kit rather than commit to a project that requires more labor and special equipment. Now, it is technically possible to get a solid mechanical profile with acid etching, but it does have some issues. Here's just a few of them. It's very difficult to get a consistent profile because concrete is inherently inconsistent, so results are unreliable. Acid can't remove contaminants on the floor like oil or grease, so you'd need to grind those spots up anyway, and that's assuming you know where all the contaminants on the floor are located. Acid, by nature, is a contaminant, so in order to neutralize it, you need to introduce another contaminant, water. This vicious cycle makes it very difficult to guarantee a totally sterilized floor. Before we get coating, the floor needs what it's gonna get. Sucked. I hope the reasons why are obvious. If not, it's because it's still covered in dust and debris, and epoxy doesn't like that. If you were in a garage, you could just as easily switch from suck to blow and get down with your favorite leaf blower. They actually do a better job, but the ensuing dust devil may upset your neighbors. Now get those cleats on and tape off those doorways, because it's time to start mixing. You'll want to mix as close to the area you're painting as possible without being on the soon-to-be painted floor. Put down some Visqueen or heavy-duty garbage bags. You definitely don't want raw epoxy parts getting where they aren't supposed to be. If they do get in those places, you'll need to wipe it off with a rag soaked in xylene or methyl ethyl ketone, or MEK, including your skin, or your eyes. So make sure you keep chemical resistant gloves on at all times. Kits should come with your ratios predetermined, but in my case, it's leftovers from a big job and needed to be ratioed manually. I clipped a mixing stick into the bucket with the proper ratios marked. For the record, these are different for every product. This mix is 3 parts resin to 1 part activator. I've also seen 2 to 1.3, etc. Resin is always thicker and can take forever to pour out of the bucket. I think I timed this at 5 minutes. Activator pours way quicker. Take care not to let it splash around. This stuff can be a nasty health hazard if it comes into physical contact. Remember, each individual component will never ever dry out on its own. Curing is a chemical process that only occurs when components are mixed thoroughly and at the correct ratio. So if they're not mixed thoroughly and at the correct ratio, then you got one epic mess on your hands. After all components are assimilated, the mix needs to get on the floor as soon as possible. Keeping it in the bucket accelerates the curing process, while getting it on the floor and spreading it out slows it down. The floor layout is a little weird here, but you basically want to pour it on the opposite side of your exit off the painted floor. Make the blob look like one long, consistent hot dog. Squeegeeing is not only the most effective way of moving epoxy on the floor, but it also forces it down into the concrete, as opposed to just rolling. So you want to run that squeege on as much of the floor as you can, progressively pushing the bead toward dry floor. I just hit the perimeter first so I can cut in around the walls and various obstacles with a 3-inch chip brush. It's the most time consuming in bending over, and I like to get it out of the way while the epoxy is still juicy. Oh, and don't throw out the chip brush until you're off the floor. You want it around to scoop up whatever incorrigibles make their way into the wet paint while you're still working. As this is the prime coat, I'm putting heavy forward pressure on that squeege to really get that shit down in there. This coat should feel pretty thin. I actually had too much on the floor and had to scoop some out back into a bucket. Oops. Now, if this floor was destined to have colored paint, I would have filled in the cracks with some type of crack filler. We always used epoxy infused with fumed silica. Nasty shit. With the clear coat, however, the visual appeal is all about the natural distress and textures in the concrete. So in this case, the cracks add character. This floor gets a pass. Rolling on the prime coat should be reserved exclusively for flattening out puddles or drips or heavy spots. The roller can actually pull epoxy off the floor in thinner spots, which is like the opposite of what you want. So it's good practice to give the roller a good soak while you're still squeegeeing. Rest assured, we'll roll out the whole floor on the top coat. Now hopefully you walked on the prime floor with just your cleats or your socks on, and 1, discovered it was dry, 2, removed any stuck debris, bugs, or animals before you started mixing. This is actually a product they don't make anymore. Crawford Labs 4805. If you've got a guy who's got a guy who's got a chemist, then it's possible to get it cloned, but I understand this is asking a lot for most people. There are still some solid enough DIY kits out there. and I haven't used them, so I'm not going to make any specific recommendations or endorsements. But you should get something that's 2-component 100% solids. You want at least 20 mils of coverage. Cycloaliphatic or any other amber-resistant properties are a huge plus. And just a footnote in case you didn't know, UV light causes epoxy to amber over time. Avoid brands like Rust-Oleum or Sherwin-Williams or really any water-based product. The cheap stuff does not last, and take my word for it, you will regret using it. Thicker epoxy will be more durable and smooth out imperfections on the floor. The top coat isn't a whole lot different from the prime coat, other than lighter pressure on the squeege and some added hazards. For me, the biggest challenge is just being able to see the damn stuff. This is just as hard for pigmented paint too. The prime coat seems like it's working against you every step of the way. On one hand, it's acting like some sort of friction vortex that makes it extra hard to push your tools on. Except for your cleats, which, contrary to everything else, are always in danger of sliding out from under you.
Oh, Jesus.
Don't worry, this is how it's supposed to go. But if you do go down, you'll need to roll out the imprint of your butt and give yourself a nice little Victorian baby MEK rag bath. Oh, we've all done it. True story. I once had to finish an 8,000 square foot job in my underwear because I lost control of the cap on a 55-gallon drum and took an activator bath as I was filling 5-gallon buckets. Anyway, when you squeegee, try to make sure all your squeegee passes are parallel. The final step on the top coat is to back roll everything out. This isn't like freshening up the den where you roll out sporadically. You need to roll in the same direction, perpendicular to your squeegee path, overlapping 4 to 6 inches without lifting the roller off the ground, if possible. This is extra important for pigmented epoxy because it's the best way to keep the color consistent as it cures. Leaving the roller in contact with the ground keeps things as uniform as possible because lifting it up and setting it down has the potential to leave divots and agitate pigment. The closer the floor is to going off, the greater the chance of little imperfections like that getting baked in. I went over this floor twice because the coat was a little heavy and I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to get any runs. The roller was definitely harder to move on the second time around. This is also when you're most prone to slipping. Any skids left on the floor by your cleats should be rolled back over, unless you want to keep them as a fun little battle scar. Epoxy is harder than concrete. It's oil and chemical resistant, easy to clean, and, when applied correctly, will look great for decades to come. A few additional notes. I don't add aluminum oxide, aka non-skid, in basements. In a garage or industrial setting, non-skid is strongly recommended, if not absolutely necessary. I don't care for the look of flake, but I understand not everyone shares this sentiment. And it can go a long way to obstructing dirt, debris, and other imperfections on a finished floor. However, nothing screams amateur paint job louder than clumped up flake patterns. The proper way to apply flake isn't to sprinkle it on, but rather to grab a walnut-sized amount in your hand and throw it straight up into the air. The flake will disperse evenly as it falls. Save sprinkling for tight spots, and only a little bit at a time. Listen, it's not repainting your kid's bedroom or refinishing your deck. You must accept that there's no shortcuts, or one way or another, you'll be paying for it. And it certainly doesn't help that so many consumer-grade kits in the market right now are just scams. At least half the residential jobs I've done in my day involved removal of low-grade epoxy applied with inferior preparation methods like you saw on my floor. If you're the kind of person who's no stranger to hard work and are content to suffer for a few days for the right results, then yeah, go for it. But if not, maybe it's time to call in a qualified specialist. Other than me, because at the end of the day, there's nothing more expensive than doing it for cheap. If you found this video useful, go ahead and obliterate that like and subscribe button, comment down below. It all helps to make the algorithm for my content. If you like what I do and want to support the channel, you can check out my online store, mujincontact.com, or I like coffee too. Thanks for grinding with me today, guys. I hope you found this helpful. If not, entertaining. I bid you good luck on all future endeavors. Godspeed.